Hey, everybody. Welcome back to American Literature. So I drove a little down the road today just to kind of get out of the house and come to a scene where, you can imagine Joy Hulga and Manly Pointer on the hay bales here with, some liquor and condoms and dirty cards and well, that's more at the ending of the story. But I thought it'd be nice to come out to a farm since the story's set in farm country. Most of your discussion comments were about the ending of the story, but I want to leave that for a little bit later. And I want to start with sort of the scene before Manly Pointer shows up. And of course, I guess the main character, Joy Hulga, that's what I like to call her anyway, Joy Hulga. Let's get the facts straight on her because it's easy to kind of get some things crossed up. So Joy Hulga, first when she was 10 years old, had the bottom half of her leg shot off, and she never lost consciousness, and now she has an artificial leg there. But that's not what kept her from getting off the farm and being a professor of philosophy. She also has a heart condition, so it's easy to kind of slip those details up, but she has a heart condition. And of course, Manly Pointer, well, we'll talk about him later. She has a heart condition, so she's stuck on the farm when she'd much rather be in a university talking about a bunch of nonsense. By the way, philosophy is not necessarily a bunch of nonsense. I've always had trouble reading it, but Flannery O'Connor doesn't seem to think much of it here. Let's face it, Joy Hulga is kind of a caricature, a parody of a philosopher, a philosophy student. She does have a doctoral degree, a PhD in philosophy. She doesn't believe in anything. She's clearly doesn't believe in anything at all. Of course, she's an atheist as well. She's grumpy. She dresses like a little kid. In fact, she's really quite childish for all as intelligent as she thinks she is. Then we have the other two main women in the story, Mrs. Hopewell, and that's Joy's mother, Joy Hulga's mother. And of course, she's always hoping well. She has these little expressions, and she tries to be cheerful, so she lives up to her name, Hopewell. She is divorced, but she and Joy live on the farm, but she needs a farm manager, and she hires a farmer, Mr. Freeman. And Mr. Freeman, she gets a good reference on Mr. Freeman, but she's also, before she hires him, she's told that his wife is just overbearing. We'll use that word. So she has a plan, and to tell you the truth, guys, I've often, don't tell anybody this, but I've done this myself when I come across people like Mrs. Freeman. They want to have their nose into everything. They want to be in charge of everything. You know what? Get them involved in everything. Put them in charge of everything. They want to work? Put them to work, because you're never going to keep them out. So they want to get involved in anything, get them right in there and put them to work. So I like the way Mrs. Hopewell deals with that. Mrs. Freeman, in a way, though, Mrs. Freeman, and at the end we'll get to Carly's very good observation. Mrs. Freeman in the end. Mrs. Freeman in the beginning, the story starts with Mrs. Freeman and it ends with Mrs. Freeman. So there's something going on here. Besides the neutral expression that she wore when she was alone, Mrs. Freeman had two others, forward and reverse, that she used for all her human dealings. So she's not someone who sits and pauses. She's either all forward, or if she hits a blunt wall, she's all back. She has two daughters, Glynis and Cara May, and there's lots of dark Southern Gothic humor about their interactions with men. And a chiropractor student gets one of them in the back of a car, etc., etc. It's really kind of funny. And Mrs. Freeman is interested in anything dark, anything medical. She loves hearing the story of Joy's leg getting shot off. She likes to give the morning vomit report from one of her daughters who's pregnant. So she's a real interesting person. And frankly, I find her quite funny. And the ending of the story, I think, shows her to be really rather wise. She's dumb like a fox. So that's sort of the theme. That's sort of the scene here. Is we have Mrs. Hopewell and Mrs. Freeman, and poor Joy just hates listening to them both. Things go. Here's a great little exchange of words. When Mrs. Hopewell said to Mrs. Freeman, "Life was like that," Mrs. Freeman would say, "I always said so myself." Nothing had been arrived at by anyone that had not first been arrived at by her. She was quicker than Mr. Freeman. When Mrs. Hopewell said to her after they had been on the place for a while, "You're the wheel behind the wheel," and winked, Mrs. Freeman had said, "I know it. I've always been quick. It's some that are quicker than others." "Everybody's different," Mrs. Hopewell said. "Yes, most people is," Mrs. Freeman said. "It takes all kinds to make the world. I always said it did myself." So if you didn't find this funny, you'd find it really, really annoying. And Joy, of course, thinks her thoughts are so deep and she's so smart. She just can't tolerate these people, and they drive her up a wall. So that's the scene here before Manly Pointer shows up. And boy, isn't he something? And you gotta love that name, don't you, Manly Pointer? I think if I ever become a stripper, that'll be my stage name, Manly Pointer. And of course, that's not his name at all. That's a fake name he uses every so often to steal a woman's body part, or maybe he uses some other name. So then Manly enters. And he's so good at what he does. I mean, you got to admire this guy. And because Mrs. Hopewell, she's not really that easy of a target. She's not really religious. Her Bible's upstairs in the attic somewhere. Her daughter's an atheist. And a Bible salesman shows up. And he tries this angle and that angle. And he's just a textbook study in how to be a salesperson. Number one, Mrs. Hopewell, he began using her name in a way that sounded almost intimate. "I know you believe in Christian service." "Well, yes." "I know," he said and paused, looking very wise with his head cocked on one side. "That you're a good woman. Friends have told me." Mrs. Hopewell never liked to be taken for a fool. "What are you selling?" she asked. No salesman ever wants to hear that. "Bibles," the young man said, and his eyes raced around the room. Before he added, "I see you have no family Bible in your parlor. I see that's the one lack you got." All right, so he's complimenting her. That's all. That's the only lack you got. Bad grammar, though. Mrs. Hopewell could not say, "My daughter's an atheist and won't let me keep the Bible in the parlor." She said, stiffening slightly, "I keep my Bible by my bedside." This was not the truth. It was in the attic somewhere. "Lady, the Word of God ought to be in the parlor." "Well, I think that's a matter of taste," she began. "I think, lady, for Christian, the Word of God ought to be in every room in the house besides in his heart. I know you're a Christian because I can see it in every line of your face." She stood up saying, "Well, young man, I don't want to buy a Bible and I smell my dinner burning." All right, so he's on the ropes here. He's tried 3 tricks here, buttering up to her, making her feel like, a good Christian, so he's working it. He didn't get up. He began to twist his hands, looking down at them. He said softly, "Well, lady, I'll tell you the truth. Not many people want to buy one nowadays, and besides, I know I'm real simple. I don't know how to say a thing but to say it. I'm just a country boy." He glanced up at her unfriendly face. "People like you don't want to fool with country people like me." "Why?" she cried. "Good country people are the salt of the earth. Besides, we all have different ways of doing. It takes all kinds to make the world go round. That's life." Well, he's got her, right? He found that sweet spot. "You don't have time for a simple guy like me. I like good country people." "You said a mouthful," he said. "Why, I think there aren't enough good country people in the world," she said, stirred. "I think that's what's wrong with it." His face brightened. "I didn't introduce myself," he said. "I'm Manly Pointer from out in the country around Willoughby, not even from a place, just from near a place." You wait a minute, she said. I have to see about my dinner. She went out to the kitchen and found Joy standing near the door where she'd been listening. Get rid of the salt of the earth, she said, and let's eat. I can't be rude to anybody, Mrs. Hopewell said. I appreciate your honesty. You don't see any more real honest people unless you go out in the country. And he's got her. He's got her. And next thing you know, she invites him to dinner. Now, the guy has done his research, okay? He knows all along there's an artificial body part in that house, and he's going to get that. He also knows she's got a heart condition. So, of course, he says, I guess a lot of boys come telling you they're working their way through college, but I'm going to tell you that somehow I don't want to go to college. I want to devote my life to Christian service. See, he said, lowering a voice, I got this heart condition. I may not live long. When you know it's something wrong with you, you may not live long. Well then, lady, won't you stay for dinner, she says to him. And she regretted it right away. So Manly Pointer is in the door. He's getting close to that leg. Now he's got to work on Joy.